This is the brand new city building war strategy game that is called Call of Dragons. This is the same developer of Rise of Kingdoms, which is Legou Games. In today's video, we're going to head and take a look at Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons. So first thing here, let's talk about the factions in Call of Dragons. Call of Dragons have three factions, which is the Spring Warden, League of Orders, and Wilderburg. Each factions in here have their own specific faction bonus, and as well as different types of units. Now, in comparison to Rise of Kingdoms, we have civilizations in Rise of Kingdoms. There's actually a lot of civilizations in Rise of Kingdoms. Now, in Rise of Kingdoms, each civilization also have its own civilization buff. And you are also going to start with a starting commander. Similarly, with Call of Dragons, these factions will have a starting hero as well. What is very unique in Call of Dragons that is very, very different from Rise of Kingdoms is the special units. In Rise of Kingdoms, each civilization only have one special units. But when we look into the Call of Dragons, the entire units that each faction has its own specific attributes. So for example, when we look into the marksman in here, this is going to increase the physical attack buff. When we look into the League of Orders, when we take a look into the marksman, it is going to have a different buff. Same way as we look into the Wilderburg, for the marksman in here, it is going to provide a different buff as well. In Rise of Kingdoms, we just have one special unit. For example, I have the Ottoman Empire here. So you can see that I have the elite Janissaries, but the other units in here, they are just the standard units. So if you're coming from Rise of Kingdoms and switching into Call of Dragons, or you want to play both, just understand that whenever you choose the factions in here, that there is differences in the special units. Now, typically when people recommend in Call of Dragons, they say League of Orders is one of the best because of Waldir. I made a video on it and I did say it is Waldir and League of Orders, but I've been considering my statement from before, but I'm thinking that Spring Wardens might be the better option to pick because of Guanwin starting hero, since a lot of players, when you are doing the behemoth raids in here, which is when you raid behemoths, which we're going to talk about also later, is that the marksmen or the archers actually do really well onto scoring high. So now let's take a look into the buildings in here. For Rise of Kingdoms and as well as in Call of Dragons, the buildings are almost the same. When you select certain civilization Rise of Kingdoms, your theme on the buildings will be different. In the same way, if you select a different faction in Call of Dragons, the buildings will be very different as well. But inside the city, there is something quite unique in Call of Dragons. As you can see, you can interact here with the heroes in Call of Dragons. Not like in Rise of Kingdoms, you don't even see any heroes in here. In Call of Dragons, I can interact with a hero, so I can communicate with them. Just like this, there is storylines behind each heroes in here, right? So we're going to just go through this. There's actually a voice here, which we have it muted at the moment, but you can definitely listen to the voice acting of the characters in here, or the voices of the characters. So I am just going to just skip through all this in here. Once you finish it, you actually can get rewards from just talking to the heroes in here. As you can see, we got 5 Waldir tokens. This is really good. This game is really good to free to play, in my opinion. Now, another thing that is different in this game from Call of Dragons in comparison to Rise of Kingdoms, as you can see in Rise of Kingdoms, there's only 4 units. But in Call of Dragons, there's actually 5 units. So that 5 units, let's take a look into that one. We will have our infantry, we will have our archers, we will have our mage, we will have our cavalry, and then we will have our flying unit. So there is no such thing as siege specific units in here, which is also very interesting. It is actually under the cavalry, which is the work rhinos or transport units. As you can see, this is one of them. It is a tier 1 and it's very, very different stats compared to the actual cavalry unit. So that is very interesting here in Call of Dragons within the building, inside your city. And as you notice right now, in Call of Dragons, I don't have a VIP in the main screen. In comparison to Rise of Kingdoms, you can see my VIP. Now, for Call of Dragons, the VIP is within a building. So you have to build that building, and then you can start accumulating honor points. But for the most part, Call of Dragons and Rise of Kingdoms is very, very similar to each own. Now, if you go into the gold chest, you can see what is unique with Call of Dragons in here. It guarantees epic or legendary hero in every 10 draws. In comparison to the Rise of Kingdoms, there is no guarantee after 10 draws that you are going to get a epic or a legendary. Now, let's talk about the neutral units in Call of Dragons. In Call of Dragons, there are multiple types of neutral units. There is the Darkling Patrols, and there is the Dark Creatures. The Patrols will give you more XP. The Creatures will give you more Arcane Dust that you can use for your artifacts, which we are going to talk about later. There's also the Darkling Guards, which they guard a special chest here that you have to defeat them, then you can claim the chest. In Call of Dragons, there's really a lot of things that you can do to keep your time within the game. There is also a Behemoths in Call of Dragons, which is something that Rise of Kingdoms does not have. And after you purify a behemoth, they become your behemoth, and you can actually summon them in the game. So for example, I want to summon this Hydra. I can do it just like here, and I'm going to click here, and I'm going to summon Hydra, and it's just going to come out right away. And as you can see, the Hydra is summoned right now. And if we are in combat, this Hydra will actually protect your team or your alliance. It will attack any enemy heroes within the area. It will protect this area, basically. So another thing is that here in the Call of Dragons is you can do an elite raid of the behemoths. So as you can see, we have a list of behemoths that we have captured already or purified. And when we do an elite raid, they are going to be much stronger. They're going to be just more powerful than when you first challenge them. But you're also going to get different rewards from it. So it really gives you engagement here in Call of Dragons. Another thing is that we have a level 6 Darkling Fort, which is very different from Rise of Kingdoms, which only leads to level 5. So let's take a look into Rise of Kingdoms in here. Rise of Kingdoms have only barbarians in here. All right, only barbarians, and there is going to be barbarian forts as well. And it is only going to be up to level 5 in the home kingdom. Now, Rise of Kingdoms have these keeps in here, which is quite similar to what you guys see with the Darkling Guards. But what Rise of Kingdoms does not have is behemoths. So for Rise of Kingdoms, the behemoths are the exchange of the holy sites in here, because behemoth provides buff. As you can see, if we purify this or capture this, we are then going to gain building engineering, hero stamina limit, and alliance member limit. Now let's talk about the heroes in Call of Dragons. As this game is just starting out, there's actually quite a bit of heroes already that has been released. So heroes is very similar to what we know in Rise of Kingdoms, that is the commanders in Rise of Kingdoms. So the difference in here is that the commanders in Rise of Kingdoms are all historical based. And for Call of Dragons, the heroes here are just fictional heroes. But very similar with Rise of Kingdoms, there is attributes, there's a gatherer, there's support, a lot of similarities in here as well. So basically the main concept here, if you're coming from Rise of Kingdoms going to Call of Dragons, max out for skill first for PvP and PvE fighters. Now, the biggest difference in Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons is the stamina. What is the stamina, you might say? Well, the stamina is basically the amount of energy that you can use per hero in Call of Dragons. So in Rise of Kingdoms, you can keep on fighting without any repercussion. But in Call of Dragons, as you can see, the first time your hero attacks another Lord's Legion, garrison a building, or launches or joins a rallied army after leaving your city, this will cost 10 stamina. So if you just randomly join a rally that is like, you know, let's say we rally this base and you join it, you're going to consume 10 stamina. And if I launch a rally right now and then I cancel it, it will also cost some stamina. So let me give you an example in here. We saw that we have about 90 something, stamina for our Bakshi. So if I launch a rally just like that, I'm going to cancel that. It automatically consumes stamina. So if you do a lot of cancellation, then you're going to be draining your stamina. And after that, once you have no stamina, you cannot bring your hero out to fight. So that is pretty much controlling the way you fight in the field or even in the garrison buildings. So it says here, when a hero has less than 10 stamina left, they cannot leave the city. So something that is totally new in Call of Dragons that is not in Rise of Kingdoms, which makes the game a little bit more interesting so that you can put in a little bit different strategy as you're playing the game. So it is essential in this game to have a lot of heroes so that you can keep on fighting. Now let's talk about combat in Call of Dragons. And what I really find so unique in Call of Dragons is that it encourages you to fight more than in Rise of Kingdoms. In Call of Dragons, whenever you fight other players, as you can see in this video, you are actually going to be gaining merit points every time you fight. So as for example, as you can see, we fought here. And depending on the amount of severely wounded or deads you produce towards the opponent, you are going to get some kill reward, and which is going to be the merits. We're not going to go too much in detail with the merits, but I'm going to make a specific video for that. But eventually with the merits, as you earn, you can go to the Alliance store. Oh, by the way, you have to be in Alliance to earn merits. If you're not in Alliance and you battle and you combat, you're not going to get merits, all right? That's a huge tip that I'm giving you guys here. But there is a merit store, and you can use these merit coins to purchase a lot of things in here. But the best thing to buy in this merit store is buying these instant heal, which is something that Rise of Kingdoms does not have. And let's go ahead and talk about the hospital here as well. The hospital in Call of Dragons is also very unique. There is two types of healing in the Call of Dragons. There is the free healing and the resource healing. There is no such thing as speed ups in Call of Dragons for healing. As you guys are aware, in Rise of Kingdoms, when you go to the hospital, it will cost you resources, and as well as you will be able to use some speed ups in here to speed things up for the healing. And that is something that Call of Dragons does not have. You cannot even use gems to heal your units in Call of Dragons. So that's very unique in Call of Dragons. So the basic idea that I have here for Call of Dragons is that have a lot of troops, fight a lot, because the hospital in Call of Dragons is unlimited. Open field fighting can be done in an unlimited manner of fashion. Now let's talk about what is another unique thing in Call of Dragons, which is the policies. Now, if you think about crystal technology in Rise of Kingdoms, this is basically similar to it. The policies will reset every season. You are going to be gaining some of the prestige points through basically the expedition in Rise of Kingdoms, which is the Dragon Trail in Call of Dragons. So you're going to be able to loot. You're also going to get some Dragon's coins in here. So I'm going to go purchase some of the commander in here for that one. And what's nice about this is that as you progress onto that, prestige points, you are going to be able to, improve your policies in here, which I have as well. I pretty much have this maxed out. Now, one suggestion that I recommend for you guys when you guys first start into Call of Dragons is to do the free resource healing. I actually have a specific video for this. So when you're looking at my screen right now, I made a mistake in my game in here, but watch my video about hospital because I explain it in much detailed fashion. I'll put a card up in the corner, or you can also search for it on YouTube. So I hope that whenever I talk about the heroes and commanders in here, I don't mix them up. I think I did a few times in here, but here's the thing. Call of Dragons is very, very unique, right? Let's talk about the equipments and artifacts. Well, one last thing that is huge difference in here. The equipments and artifacts are very interesting because two kind of similar. I maybe kind of thinking about for Call of Dragons, the artifacts is similar to the armaments system that we have in Rise of Kingdoms rather than equipments, in my opinion. But the artifacts here in Call of Dragons, you can see I have in here equipped to the hero, and I can actually activate it right there. Boom. I'm actually using the skill depending on however I want, basically. So the artifacts in here are sort of like the equipments. You equip it to the hero in here, and then you are actually going to be getting some buff. Each specific artifacts in here have their own specific types of skill. For example, I have this gathering artifact. and it does quick gather. Basically, when I activate it, it instantly gathers 400,000 or 300,000 ore or 1,600 mana. Or for example, let's summon this in here. Let's bring out this another hero, and you can see that it's going to populate a new resource node, which is absolutely insane. All right, so we got this. We're going to activate here, and it's going to produce a new resource node for me to farm. Isn't that amazing? Little things in here that makes me happy in Call of Dragons that Rise of Kingdoms does not have. In Rise of Kingdoms, you do have the equipments in here. As you can see, I have with it my Boudica, and you can also crit your equipment in Rise of Kingdoms. Now, also Rise of Kingdoms have added the armaments within the formation system in here as well. So, in Rise of Kingdoms, you cannot activate the skills. It has less intuitiveness, I should say, in comparison to Call of Dragons. Now, let's talk about the alliance here in comparison to Call of Dragons and Rise of Kingdoms. Within the alliance is very, very similar. As you can see, the page is very similar. You have pretty much everything, the same layout in here as well. Take a look at that. The only thing that's different, which is the holy site, which is the behemoth in Call of Dragons. Now, of course, there are some few differences between the technology in Call of Dragons compared to the research in the Rise of Kingdoms. The biggest difference in here really is the behemoths in Call of Dragons, because you can summon them once you have captured them, and then the merit store as well. There is no such thing as the alliance inventory in here in the Call of Dragons in comparison to Rise of Kingdoms. Now, in Rise of Kingdoms, whenever you try to put in a territory to gain more resources, you will have to capture a specific node. But for Call of Dragons, it is very different. So I'll show you how we are doing the territories in Call of Dragons in here. So if we drop a Alliance Tower, you can see that there is grid lines there. All right. And you can see the amount of resources that we will be able to consume. And we can see on the top here what are the resources that we're going to be able to earn. So if I move it here, it provides different amount of resources in there. And what's unique in Call of Dragons is the roads. So the roads allows you to, walk faster or march faster. In comparison to Rise of Kingdoms, there is no such thing as roads. You can also upgrade the roads. Within this roads, within the territory in here, your alliance can also drop barricades. But this is going to be, a member type of action. So if I want to drop a barricade, I can do that. This will slow down the enemy's advancement if they do march forward to the barricades here. Another thing that is super cool in Call of Dragons is that you can turn your Alliance Tower into an aggressive tower. So for example, I have this Alliance Tower. I can click this gear and I can upgrade it. And you can see I can do a city barrage, or I can build roads to connect villages to Alliance buildings. So if I want to do that, I can click like this. I can do build road, and then I can select whichever I want it to connect with, which right now there is really no option for this specific flag. For this one in here, if I do this, I can build a road. Again, like this, you can see that there is going to be length in here. I can change it up in here if I want it to go from here to here. So there's a lot of things that are really unique in Call of Dragons. So with the titles for the Alliance, it's very similar to Rise of Kingdoms. There's a pretty cool building here in Call of Dragons. And let's take a look into this Alliance Keep. So I built this Alliance Keep here. You can actually build maximum of 6. So take a look at this one. We can reinforce this as a garrison, but you can only bring here range units. So you're not going to be able to bring in, melee units. You can see only marksmen and magic units can garrison the Alliance Keep. So I believe this is going to attack any incoming enemy targets in here. So I put this over here. I haven't really used this. We never ever used this, so I've never seen how it works yet. But as you can see, there's a bunch of barricades in here from our alliance, and I actually have a barricade here as well. Whenever there's an enemy advancement, we can then put in units into the Alliance Keep, and I think it's just going to defend our area and attack the others in here. Like I said, I haven't used this yet, but this is something pretty cool. I just built this, and I really want to see how this thing is going to perform in combat. Oh, lastly, before we kind of end the video here, one thing that I should tell you guys that is pretty cool in Call of Dragons as well. You know how in Rise of Kingdoms, the gold here is plunderable? Well, in Call of Dragons, the mana is actually not going to be able to be plundered, which is pretty cool, as you can see. The only thing that can be plundered in here is your gold, your wood, and your ore. The mana here, which is the gold equivalent in Rise of Kingdoms, is 100% protected. So only 3 resources can be plundered here in Call of Dragons. So I'm sure there's a lot more things in here that we haven't covered in here with the comparison for Rise of Kingdoms and Call of Dragons. But for sure, definitely, you guys should check this game out. At least try it out. It is going to be released officially on March 28th. So check it out. I am currently in server 14. So if you want to find me or message me, this is my account in here, so feel free to do so, and I'll see you guys again next time. Don't forget to hit sub and like to see more Call of Dragons content in the future.